All right, welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're going to be talking about something that I think pretty much everyone can relate to,
Yeah.
uh, and that is learning. And, specifically how the way you feel when you're learning something new
hmm
connects to what you're actually trying to get out of it. So, like, are
Yeah.
you trying to just understand the material, or are you trying to, like, be the best in the class?
Right. Like, what's the goal?
Yeah, exactly. And so you, our amazing listeners, actually sent us some really interesting stuff about this, and I think this is going to be a fun one to like really
I
unpack.
think this should be good. I'm
Yeah.
excited.
Yeah, and I think hopefully by the end we can help you kind of understand like why you might be feeling certain ways when you're in the middle of learning and how maybe even how to kind of change some of those feelings if you're not liking them.
Right. Yeah, because it's not just like a pass or fail thing. It's like the whole emotional experience of learning, which I think we can all relate to. Sometimes it's not so fun.
Yeah, totally. So our main source for this deep dive is this huge meta-analysis by Chongjong Huang.
Mm.
It came out a while ago, 2011, but it's still like, I think, one of the biggest studies on this topic.
It's a good one.
Yeah, and a meta-analysis, for people who maybe haven't heard that term, it's basically a study of other studies. So it's
Mm.
like instead of doing one experiment, they go and look at all the experiments that other people have done and try to kind of put all the findings together to get a bigger picture.
Right. So it's almost like a summary, but a very rigorous and scientific summary of all the research that's been done on this topic.
Exactly. And this one, it's kind of mind-blowing. It looked at 93 different studies
Wow.
with over 30,000 participants.
Like a lot of people.
Yeah,
And I mean, when you have that many, you can be pretty confident in the results.
yeah,
Mm.
exactly. And so before we jump into like what they actually found, I think it's good to just kind of define some of these terms just to make sure we're all on the same page. So let's start with achievement goals.
Okay.
What are we talking about when we say that?
So basically, achievement goals, they're kind of like, I guess the best way to think about it is what are you trying to achieve?
Right.
When you're in a situation where you can succeed or fail, right? Like in a learning environment, at work, or anything where there's some kind of standard of competence, right?
Right, right.
And so it's basically about your aim for how you're going to like demonstrate your competence. There was a team, Pick Run and some other folks,
Okay.
they defined it in 2009 as like competence relevant aims in achievement settings. So it's really like what's driving you when you're trying to learn something or achieve something.
Got it. So like the big picture of what you're trying to accomplish.
Exactly.
Okay. And I feel like initially, at least when I was learning about this stuff, it was kind of like, okay, there are these two paths, right? You either want to master something or you want to perform well compared to others.
Yeah, that's the classic way of thinking about it. Right. So you have your mastery goals, which are all about like developing your skills and getting a deep understanding of the material. And then you have performance goals, which are more about like proving your ability.
Yeah.
And maybe even like doing better than others. Right.
Yeah. So one is like you want to learn it for yourself. The other one is you want to be better than everyone else.
Right. Like you want to show off. Right. You want to get that A plus and everyone else can get a B.
Exactly. But then I feel like it kind of got a little bit more like detailed from there.
It did.
Yeah.
So back in 1994, Eliot proposed this kind of three-factor model, which said, okay, we still have our mastery goals, right?
Mm-hmm.
But those performance goals, like you said, it can be for different reasons.
Right.
So he split that into two: performance approach goals,
Okay.
where you're actively trying to be the best and show off how good you are, and then performance avoidance goals, where you're more concerned with like not looking incompetent.
Got it.
Right. So it's not about necessarily being the best, but just not being the worst.
Ah, okay. So it's more like, so it's not even really about being like average. It's just about not being at the bottom.
Right. It's like I just don't want to stand out for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Interesting. So the reason you're trying to perform well could be really different, right? It could be to like shine, or it could be to just not look bad.
Exactly.
Okay. And then they made it even more complicated.
They did. So it didn't stop there. In 2001, Eliot and McGregor came along and said, you know what, we need to also look at the mastery side of things a little more closely.
Okay.
So they added this 2x2 framework for mastery goals.
Okay.
And they said, all right, well, you can have mastery approach goals where you're really focused on self-improvement and actually mastering the task.
Yeah.
But then you can also have mastery avoidance goals.
Okay.
And this is where you're more worried about not misunderstanding something, right? Or like failing to learn it properly.
So it's almost like a fear of like getting it wrong.
Exactly.
Even if you're still trying to like master it for yourself, it's not really about like being better than other people. It's just about, like, I don't want to get this wrong internally.
Right. It's like, I want to make sure I really, really understand it deeply.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, so we've got the goals down, the achievement goals. Now let's flip it over to the feeling side.
Yeah.
The achievement emotions.
Yeah.
What are we even talking about here?
So achievement emotions, think about it like this. When you're doing something where you could like feel competent or incompetent, you're doing something, trying to achieve something, there are going to be emotions that come up.
Yeah.
Whether it's, the thrill of finally solving a difficult problem or the stress before a presentation or even the satisfaction of completing a difficult project.
Oh, yeah.
All those feelings that are connected to, trying to achieve something or feeling competent are basically your achievement emotions.
So it's like not just the goal itself, but it's like what you feel while you're on the way there and maybe what you feel at the end, like after you've achieved it or not.
Exactly. And Peckrin and his colleagues, they suggested that these feelings are tied to a couple of things. One is how much control do you feel like you have over the situation?
Okay.
Right. Do you feel like you're the one who's in charge of whether you succeed or fail? And the other one is how much do you value what you're doing or
Okay.
the outcome? Right. So if you really care about what you're learning, you're going to have different emotions than if you don't really care about it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I think now the question is like, how do these two things connect? We've got the goals, we've got the feelings.
Right.
What were people's initial thoughts on how they might be related?
So early on, like Elliot and Dweck back in 1988, they had this idea that, if you're really driven by wanting to master something, you're more likely to have positive feelings about it.
Okay.
Right. It makes sense. You're enjoying the process of learning. You're feeling good about your progress. Performance goals, on the other hand, were kind of thought to maybe lead to more negative emotions.
Okay. So it's kind of, again, like that internal versus external thing. If you're focused on your own learning, you're probably going to feel better about it than if you're like trying to beat everyone else.
Exactly.
Okay. But then I feel like, as often happens in research, people started to realize that it's not quite that simple.
Yeah, things got a little more complicated.
Right.
Later on, Peckron and some other researchers proposed this idea that actually mastery goals, they don't just lead to good feelings, but they also kind of help you keep the bad feelings at bay.
Oh, interesting. So it's like a double whammy.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And not surprisingly, performance avoidance goals, that fear of looking incompetent, those were thought to have kind of like a detrimental effect.
Yeah, that makes sense. If you're scared of looking bad, you're probably going to feel more anxious, less confident.
Right, exactly. But the interesting thing is performance approach goals, those were linked to positive emotions.
Really?
Yeah, and the reason they thought is because you feel like you have some control and you value doing better than others.
Oh, so it's like even though you're focused on other people, if you feel like you can actually achieve it, like you have that control, then it can still be a positive thing.
Right, it's like a healthy competition, right? You're pushing yourself,
Yeah.
but you're also feeling good about it. Now, one thing though, this initial thinking didn't really spell out like how mastery approach and mastery avoidance goals specifically connect with our emotions.
So there were still some missing pieces in the puzzle.
Yeah, there were some things that were kind of like left unanswered.
Okay. So that kind of brings us to this huge meta-analysis. After looking at all these studies, what did Huang actually find? What were the main connections that came out of all that data?
So the big picture finding is, I guess, not that surprising, but it's really good to have it confirmed with so much data.
Hmm.
What you're aiming for in your learning definitely makes a difference in how you feel about it.
Okay.
The meta-analysis found this like really large correlation. Correlation just means like how closely two things are connected. So there is a really large correlation between both mastery goals, just the general, I want to learn and improve, right? And the more specific mastery approach goals.
Okay.
So actively trying to like get better at something, they had this big connection with positive achievement emotions.
Okay, so if you're focused on learning, if you're focused on growth, you're more likely to feel good about the whole process.
Exactly. You're more likely to experience enjoyment and interest.
Yeah.
Like a genuine curiosity about what you're learning.
Okay. And then what about the flip side? What about when things aren't going so well?
Right. Well, on the flip side, they found this large correlation between performance avoidance goals,
Okay.
that fear of looking incompetent,
Hmm.
and negative achievement emotions, things like anxiety and worry.
Yeah.
So if you're really driven by just not looking bad,
Hmm.
you're much more likely to experience those kind of negative feelings.
So you're setting yourself up for like a rough ride emotionally if that's your main focus.
Pretty much.
Okay. Now, what about those performance approach goals, the ones where you're trying to be the best? Like those seemed a little more complicated in the initial theories.
Yeah, those are kind of tricky.
Yeah.
Because the meta-analysis found that those actually had a pretty similar correlation with both positive and negative emotions.
Really?
Yeah. It seems like if you want to be better than everyone else, it can lead to feelings of pride and excitement when you succeed.
Oh, yeah.
But it can also make you feel anxious and pressured if you're worried about not measuring up.
Yeah, because you're always looking at other people.
Right, you're always comparing yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
And that can be a recipe for anxiety.
So it's kind of like a bit of a gamble emotionally, it sounds like.
Yeah, I guess you could say that.
Now, you've been talking about these correlations, these connections, but it's important to note that, like, they weren't all the same strengths, right? Like,
Mhm.
it wasn't just a blanket statement. Every goal is equally connected to every emotion.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Can you give us an example of how that played out?
So one example, the study found that mastery goals, they had a stronger link with those like really nice positive feelings,
Hmm.
like enjoyment and interest,
Okay.
than with anxiety. So if you're really focused on just learning for learning's sake, you're more likely to just enjoy the process
Yeah.
and be curious and not really worry so much.
Yeah. That makes sense. You're not so caught up in the pressure of it. You're just like, oh, this
Yeah.
is cool. I'm learning.
Right.
Okay. Now, you mentioned earlier that, before this big meta-analysis, there were some studies that like kind of showed different things.
Yeah, there were some conflicting findings.
Yeah. Which I guess is pretty common.
It is in research, definitely.
So like, why was this meta-analysis so helpful in kind of clearing things up?
So, before this really comprehensive look at all the research, the findings on this topic were a little bit all over the place.
Okay.
Like, for example, some studies that looked at performance goals and emotions, they showed this kind of weak link to negative emotions,
Hmm.
while others found no link at all. And then there were even some that showed a positive link to positive emotions, which might seem a little counterintuitive.
Yeah. So it was like, is this good? Is this bad? We don't really know.
Exactly, right.
Okay.
And this led to a lot of back and forth about whether these performance approach goals, wanting to do better than others, whether that was actually beneficial or detrimental to your well-being.
Interesting. Okay.
Like some research by Pickrun back in 2006, it actually linked performance approach goals to feelings of pride
Okay.
and even like anger.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So like you can see how that could be good and bad, right?
Yeah.
Whereas other research, like a study by Ryan in 2005, found a negative correlation with positive affect
Okay.
and a positive correlation with anxiety. So it's like, wait, so is this good? Is this bad? It's really hard to tell,
So you basically had research saying opposite things.
pretty much.
Oh.
And it wasn't just performance approach goals. This kind of conflicting findings also showed up for performance avoidance goals, the fear of looking dumb.
Yeah.
Some showed really clear negative effects, while others were more mixed. And even for mastery approach goals, which, generally seem to be a good thing,
Yeah.
there was still some variation. Like one study might find a super strong positive correlation with like how interested someone was in the research,
Okay.
while another might find almost no relationship with anxiety. So even within the same type of goal,
Yeah.
there was a lot of like inconsistency and the same kind of variability was there for mastery avoidance goals as well.
So it sounds like it was just like a mess.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so this is where the meta-analysis is so helpful because it's like, okay, let's take a step back. Let's look at all of this together
Exactly.
and see if we can find some patterns.
Exact. And Hong's meta-analysis did that.
Mhm.
By pulling together all these studies, we can get a clearer picture, like, okay, what are the overall trends here? And then maybe we can even start to explore why these variations exist.
Yeah. Like what are the things that might explain why one study found this and another study found that?
Exactly.
Okay. And so this wasn't the first time that someone had tried to do a meta-analysis on this topic, right?
Right. There were a couple earlier ones.
Yeah. Can you tell us a bit about those?
Sure. So Back in 1999, Ross, Thorne, and Elliott did a meta-analysis, but they only looked at experimental studies.
Okay.
And they focused specifically on how mastery versus performance goals affected like intrinsic motivation. So things like how interested someone was in the task or how much they enjoyed it. And they did find that mastery goals were good for that,
Okay.
but like they didn't include any of the correlational studies,
Got it.
which, is a big chunk of the research.
So it was helpful, but it wasn't the whole picture.
Yeah. And then Holloman and his colleagues in 2010, they did a meta-analysis of the correlational studies, but they specifically looked at how achievement goals related to interest.
Okay.
So just one emotion.
Yeah.
And they did report correlations for all four types of goals in that like more detailed 2x2 framework.
Mm.
But, it was still limited because they only looked at interest and they didn't really compare findings across the different ways of thinking about achievement goals.
Okay. So Huang's meta-analysis is really like building on this previous work. It's looking at more emotions. It's including all different kinds of study.
Exactly.
And it's like really trying to get like that big picture.
Yeah, a much more nuanced understanding.
Yeah, yeah. And one of the things that I think is really interesting about this study is that they also looked at what are called moderating factors. So these are like things that might affect how strong that relationship is between your goals and your emotions.
Right, like maybe for some people the link is stronger and for others it's weaker. And
Mhm.
so they wanted to figure out why.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
So what kind of things did they look at as potential moderators?
So they looked at a bunch of different things. One was just like the age of the participants,
Okay.
right? Because there are some ideas out there that, the way we think about intelligence, the way we think about ability might change as we get older.
Yeah.
And that could affect the kinds of goals we set and how we feel about them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
They also looked at the way achievement goals were measured, like the actual questionnaires that were used in all those different studies.
Okay.
Another factor was this idea of like globality or domain. So like, are we talking about general achievement goals and emotions, like how you feel about school in general? Or are we talking about something specific, like how you feel about math class?
Okay.
And then they also looked at whether like the domain of the goal matched the domain of the emotion that was being measured.
So like if you're measuring general goals, are you also measuring general emotions? Or are you like mixing them up?
Right. And finally, and maybe most importantly, they looked at the specific achievement emotion that was being studied. So are we talking about anxiety? Are we talking about interest,
Sure.
boredom, like all these different emotions that you might experience while learning?
Yeah, that makes sense. So you could have the same goal, but depending on what emotion you're looking at, you might see a different relationship.
Exactly.
Okay. So let's dive into some of the findings. Starting with age, what did they find there?
So it was interesting, even though, like we talked about, there are these ideas that maybe our goals and how we feel about them might change as we age.
Yeah.
The meta-analysis didn't actually find a significant difference in the correlation between achievement goals and emotions for people under 18 compared to those over 18.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
It's a little surprising.
it is a little bit.
Given how I feel like, at least for me, I know I learn very differently now than I did when I was a kid.
Right.
And I probably feel differently about it too.
Yeah, yeah. And the researchers, they actually suggested a couple of reasons for this. One is that a lot of the studies they looked at, they might have included a lot of college students.
Okay.
So it's like they're all kind of in that same age range.
Yeah.
And so there wasn't enough variation in age to really see a clear difference.
Okay. So it could be that the age range was just too narrow.
Right.
Okay.
And they suggested that future research should look at a broader age range to really explore this more.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like compare elementary school kids to high school kids to adults.
Exactly.
Okay, what about the achievement goal measure? Like, did the actual questionnaires that were used make a difference?
So in some cases, yes.
Okay.
They looked at a couple of the most common measures, like the PLS and the AGQ,
Mhm.
and they found that the measure that was used actually affected the correlation between performance goals and positive emotions,
Okay.
and also the correlation between just mastery goals and the three-factor model
Hmm.
and emotions overall, but it didn't seem to make a difference for negative emotions.
So it's like how you ask about the goals can actually change how those goals relate to like positive feelings, but not negative feelings.
Yeah, it's weird. It's a little counterintuitive.
That's so interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it just shows that the tools we use to measure these things, they can matter.
Yeah. You have to be really careful about how you're measuring these things.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, what about that idea of globality or domain. So,
Mhm.
general versus specific goals and emotions.
Right. So for the globality of achievement goals,
Okay.
whether someone was thinking about like their goals for school in general or for a specific subject, they actually didn't find a significant impact on most of the correlations.
Okay.
The one exception was performance approach goals and positive emotions,
Okay.
where it seems like, yeah, the level of like globality might make a difference.
So if you're trying to be the best in like everything, that might have a different emotional impact
Yeah.
than if you're just trying to be the best in like your math class.
Yeah, potentially.
Okay. So, but for the most part, it seems like whether your goal is broad or narrow, the connection to your feelings is fairly consistent.
Yeah, that's the general trend.
Okay.
But then when they looked at the globality of achievement emotions,
Okay.
so whether people were asked about their general mood or how they felt about academics in general or how they felt about a specific subject, they did find a significant effect on several of their relationships.
Okay.
So, for example, it affected how performance goals related to positive emotions
Mm.
and also the correlations between mastery and performance approach goals with positive emotions
Okay.
and performance avoidance goals with negative emotions.
So it sounds like the way you measure emotions might be even more important than the way you measure the goals.
Potentially, yeah.
Okay.
It suggests that, like, the context of the emotion might matter more.
Yeah. So like if you're asking about like how do you feel about learning in general, you might get a different answer than if you ask like how do you feel about your history homework right now?
Right, exactly.
Okay. And what about that idea of matching the domains?
Right.
So making sure that the like level of specificity of the goal and the emotion are the same.
So they did find that matching the domains did affect the correlation between mastery goals and negative emotions.
Okay.
So, like, if the goal and the emotion were both general, you might see a stronger link than if, like, one was general and one was specific.
Okay.
However, it didn't seem to affect the other types of goals.
So if you want to know how a general desire to learn relates to like general negative feelings, you should measure both of those things in a general way.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
But they did say this finding was based on fewer studies, so, more research needed.
More research is always needed. Okay.
Of course.
So let's get to, I think, what is maybe the most interesting moderator, and that's the specific achievement emotion being studied.
Yeah, this one's really important.
Yeah, I think so too,
Yeah.
because it's like, anxiety is not the same as enjoyment.
Exactly.
So what did they find there?
So, yeah, it turned out that the specific emotion they looked at really had a significant impact
Okay.
on the correlation with both mastery and performance goals in the two-factor model
Okay.
and with all three types of goals in the three-factor model.
So depending on what feeling you're looking at, the relationship with your goals could be very different.
Exactly. So, for example, mastery goals in the two-factor model had a much stronger positive link with those enjoyable emotions like enjoyment and interest, and even with boredom than with anxiety.
Okay.
Like if you want to learn, you're more likely to enjoy it and be curious and be like okay with being a little bored sometimes than you are to be anxious.
Yeah.
Whereas general performance goals showed significant correlations with interest, anxiety, and just negative affect in general.
So it's like performance goals, they bring this whole mixed bag of feelings.
They do.
Yeah. And then when we look at the three-factor model, mastery goals had the strongest positive correlation with interest and like almost nothing with anxiety or negative affect.
You're right.
Performance approach goals showed a moderate positive correlation with interest
Yeah.
and a weak one with anxiety.
Uh-huh.
And then I think this is the one that really kind of stands out.
Uh-huh.
Performance avoidance goals
Yeah.
had a really strong positive correlation with anxiety.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah, it does.
If you're afraid of looking incompetent, you're probably going to be pretty anxious.
Exactly. And it really highlights, I think, how like detrimental those performance avoidance goals can be.
They can be rough on your mental health for sure.
Okay, so wow, we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have. It's a big topic.
Yeah. So as we kind of wrap things up, what are like the main takeaways from this meta-analysis? Like what do we really want people to remember?
I think the biggest takeaway is it really confirms that mastery goals are the way to go.
Okay.
Focusing on your own learning and your personal progress.
Those are linked to more positive emotions
Yeah.
and less negative emotions.
Yeah.
On the other hand, performance avoidance goals, those are the risky ones emotionally.
Yeah. Stay away from those if you can.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. And then what about performance approach goals? Because, it seems like those are still kind of mixed bag.
Yeah. Those are tough because, you know, th- the fact that they have this link with both positive and negative emotions might explain why we see so much variation in the research
Yeah.
and even in our own experiences, right? The
Yeah.
drive to be better than everyone, it can be motivating.
Mm-hmm.
It can feel really good when you succeed,
Yeah.
but it can also bring a lot of pressure and anxiety.
Yeah. So it's really about like understanding why you have that goal.
Exactly.
And like, is it coming from a healthy place or is it coming from like this fear of not being good enough?
Yeah. And it really emphasizes why, like, the reason behind your goal is so important.
Yeah.
Are you approaching success or are you avoiding failure?
Yeah. That makes a big difference.
Yeah. Okay, so I think another important point that came out of this research is that, like, positive and negative achievement emotions, they're not just opposites of each other.
Right.
It's not like if you're feeling good about learning, then you can't also be feeling a little bit anxious about it.
Yeah, you can totally feel both at the same time.
Yeah, yeah.
And they can be influenced by different aspects of your goals.
Yeah, and I think this is something that I've definitely experienced, like I can be really excited about learning a new skill, but also feel frustrated when I like hit a roadblock.
Oh, yeah, totally. And I think that's normal. It doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong.
Yeah, it's just part of the process.
Exactly.
Okay. And then finally, it's good to just remember that this meta-analysis, it was mainly focused on academic learning.
Right.
So while the findings